So students, now we'll move to the another topic under the sources of short-term finance, which is a very important method that is known as account receivable financing or factoring. So this method is used by the companies to raise finances, to raise funds when the company is in need for finances for a short time period. So financing, accounts receivable financing or factoring implies raising funds, raising finances through sale of assets, through sale of book debts or mortgage of book debts. So factoring implies, do listen to me very carefully, factoring implies raising funds and finances against the security of the receivables or by the sale of the receivables. So factoring implies raising finances and funds through sale of book debts or mortgage or against the security of accounts receivables. So finance companies is also known as factors. Finance companies provide advances to the business concern by taking the security of the accounts receivable or from the outright purchase of the accounts receivable or any security of account receivable which is pledged with them. So finance companies or the factors provides finances to the business concern, but there are certain terms and conditions. Finance companies want the security of accounts receivable to be pledged with them, or they want to purchase outright purchase of accounts receivable. Then only the finance companies makes advances to the business enterprise. The finance companies generally make advances up to the 60%, means up to 60% of the accounts receivable, and sometimes also the debtors of the company makes payment to them directly, which in turn forwards them to the finance companies, and sometimes the debtor makes directly payment. So there is the thing that bad debts, if there is any bad debts happening or losses happening, so the company, the business concern has to take care of it. So any bad debt losses are all to be borne by the company itself, business concern itself. So this outright sale of accounts receivable is also known as factoring, and this factoring method or accounts receivable financing method, it is a bit expensive method because it is an expensive method because these account receivable are to be sold at a very heavy discount. That is why it is known as an expensive method. So what we are doing, it is a very important topic also of the short term sources of finance. When a finance company provide advances to the business concern, because when a business concern needs finances for running their activities and operations of the business enterprise, so factoring or accounts receivable financing implies that raising of finances and funds. Accounts receivable financing or factoring implies raising of finance through sale of book debts or mortgage of book debts against the security of accounts receivable, which is to be pledged as a security with the finance companies. And therefore whenever it is pledged with the finance companies or the finance company wants to make the outright purchase of accounts receivable, the finance company or the factors make 60%, means up to, there is a specified limit, makes advances up to the 60% of the accounts receivable, and therefore this process continues and the business enterprise continues their activity using these finances, and the debtors of the firm makes the payment, which there it leads to the finance companies, and there are sometimes that the debtor of the firm makes directly payment to them. So these are the some relevant key points and terms, and there are also, if there are any bad debts and losses happening, it is to be fully what do you say, it is to be borne and actually taken after by the business concern, because there are various efforts which has to be put by the finance business enterprise to collect all the bad debts and losses. So now I have written, now we'll go back to what I have written here. So what I have discussed, it is same written here. So factoring means the accounts receivable financing implies funds or the raise of finance. So factoring or accounts receivable, in question they can ask you what do you mean factoring. In question they can ask you what do you mean accounts receivable financing. So the answer is same. Do not get hesitated or do not get your confused. So factoring or accounts receivable financing implies that raising of funds or finances against security or by sale of receivables. So factoring implies raising finances through sale or mortgage of book debts, and the finance companies or the factors provide finances because the business concern is in need on finance, so they require finances. Their finance company or the factors provide finances to the business concern or to the business companies through outright purchase of accounts receivable or keeping the security of the accounts receivable pledged with them. So factors or finance companies provide finances and funds to the business concern through outright purchase of accounts receivable or against the security of accounts receivable. And as I stated earlier, the finance company does not make 100% payment of the accounts receivable. The finance company generally make advances up to a specified limit, that is 60%. So the finance company generally make advances to the business concern up to 60% of the concerned accounts receivable pledged with them or given as a security or mortgaged with them. So up to 60% of the accounts receivable pledged with the finance companies. And more thing is that the debtor of the firm makes payment to it. The debtor of the firm makes payment to it, which in turn leads them to the finance company. It means the finance company is not paying, but the debtor of the firm makes payment to it, which in turn directly leads to the finance company. And sometimes the debtor also may be required to make payments directly to the finance companies. So bad debts, any losses, any mishaps, any financial loss happening, any financial bad debt losses are happening are to be borne by the business companies itself only. And this outright sale of accounts receivable is known as factoring. So you have to definition for, you have to write here from factoring to outright sale of accounts. This is the definition from here factoring to here. So all of you do not skip any meaning relevant key terms pertaining to this definition. I am very much clearly saying from factoring from starting here to outright sales of accounts receivable is known as factoring. You have to write till here. To get the allotted marks, I am repeatedly saying whatever I am writing in board, you have to write that to get the marks. Because you cannot be complacent, you cannot skip those relevant key terms and words. So you have to write those things. And the business concern or the company is very much relieved, means they are relaxed of the cost and effort of collecting the bad debts, losses, etc. But as we have discussed earlier, factoring is or account receivable financing is a very expensive method of financing, as it involves that the accounts receivable is to be sold at a very heavy discount. So factoring is a very expensive method of financing because accounts receivable have to be sold at a heavy discount. So I hope the meaning of accounts receivable financing or factoring is clear to all of you. So all of you have to do one thing, that you can jot down this definition at your respective copies, and watch the video several times, numerous times, so as to catch and grasp the meaning and content and concept of it, to get the clarity, and go through the book several times, uh, read the book several times through it to get an insight and meaning of it. And as usual, your exams are coming, prepare according to the scope and syllabus, and update your copies related, pertaining to chapter 1 and 2 and 3, because your copies will be submitted and it will be evaluated and assessed. So that's it. And if any sorts of doubts or problem crops up, do revert back to me, so I can provide you the required assistance.